Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here with Brother Bro. It's time to review Tick, Tick, Boom. This is a new musical directed by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and it's based off of the off-Broadway Tick, Tick, Boom, which was written by Jonathan Larson about his own life, semi-autobiographical. And Lin-Manuel Miranda apparently pushed to be the one to helm this film. He actually played Jonathan Larson in Tick, Tick, Boom in 2014 in one of its runs. And obviously he has kind of a similar career as a struggling playwright in New York City trying to make it big.
Well, as a playwright who made it big.
Yeah, but in the movie, they're trying to make it big. And while Jonathan Larson is trying to write his musical, he's also struggling with relationships and friendships and an existential crisis involving him turning 30.
I like that most of this film was very grounded and easy to relate with. For the most part, this film was a window into the life of a struggling artist. And I like that it was grounded throughout. A lot of the songs were very diverting and fun, even though the artist himself seems like he might be very pretentious in coming up with these grandiose ideas for what he wants to write about. This play featured songs that were about little snippets in his life, like the one at the diner or about his New York City apartment. It was very easy to relate with and kind of get pulled into his world and his everyday problems. What makes this film stand out is just the absolute intoxicating, frenetic energy. It's going very over the top. It's absolutely trying to please the musical theater crowd, but I think most people will love this about it. Lin-Manuel Miranda did an outstanding job at making a film for musical theater fans that, even though it's so contained and even though the production design feels very real and gritty, everything's very over the top. The camera movement, like the outlandish musical numbers, just make it a very fun and breezy film.
Even though it's about like a looming existential crisis and sometimes it does get like very serious and dour, it's not necessarily like the most profound examination of that kind of crisis as you're going to see. But I'm sure anybody can relate to the feeling that like the clock is ticking and time is running out and like you're operating based on the fear of the ticking clock. And this film is kind of an examination of that mindset. That's where you're saying like the frenetic energy really makes sense. And a lot of it is channeled through Andrew Garfield, whose performance is very jittery.
He's on cocaine basically the whole movie. He's playing like a very outgoing and charismatic person. I know nothing about Jonathan Larson, but it seemed that it would be true to someone like this. They would have to be gregarious and ambitious to undergo this insane feat of writing a play while trying to survive in New York City. You could tell that the references to New York City and to the spirit of that lifestyle resonated with my audience.
Yeah, our audience was also very clearly musical theater nerds.
Oh, they were shrieking, absolutely just shrieking and like sniveling the entire time. It was their favorite thing ever.
They did help me out though, because there is one scene that's literally Cameo City, but me not knowing that much about musical theater, I could have watched this at home and only gone like, oh, I know who like a couple of those people are, but they shrieked at everybody. So it was like, oh, thanks for letting me know that like those people matter to you.
The shrieking did annoy me, like just the constant like, it was distracting, but at the same time, I had a big takeaway, which is if this film was made for anybody, it was for musical theater people. And it felt like Lin-Manuel Miranda made it for himself as well, because obviously he is one of those people. And if you're like remotely into that, I feel like you're gonna fucking love it.
Yeah, and it seems like a great ode to Jonathan Larson and like the kind of lifestyle that he lived, the struggling musical theater artist. And also like the cast of people around Jonathan Larson feels very like authentically like that crowd.
There were also a lot of moments that were really funny, and I think this film could nearly be considered a comedy if the final act weren't so heavy. Some parts are pretty hilarious. Like it has some of the funniest scenes of any movie I've seen this year.
Okay.
I mean, I haven't seen a lot of comedies. I don't really watch like pure comedies. So I would definitely say it's like some of the funniest scenes. And it had a lot of really good jokes about New York that were like, again, resonating with people who live there.
Yeah, well, they want to laugh at like jokes about small apartments like really bad. And they're like, that's me.
Yeah, despite whether their parents are like paying for their apartments or not, they all want to feel like this is their lives.
Andrew Garfield's kind of the talk of the town for his role here, and I think he's just great. I think this is maybe up there with Silence as perhaps his best performance. Like we said, it's really high energy. It's a very emotionally heavy role, especially in the last third, and I think he nails like every second of it. I really bought this character. I liked how it wasn't afraid to examine their flaws.
He's definitely larger than life and plays it that way, and it fits. I like that Lin-Manuel Miranda went that direction for the role. There really is no scene where he's not in it, And in many of those, he is crying and singing.
Also, really have to shout out Robin de Jesus in this one. He's phenomenal in this, and he really steals a couple scenes. His character holds a lot of weight in the last half of the film. I think he should get nominated for Best Supporting Actor. I really want to see that hype happen for him.
At first I was like, he's just the quirky roommate, like that's it. And then they really go deep into that character. I completely agree that he should be nominated. I would like to see it. And I actually do think it's possible. Other notable performances, Vanessa Hudgens was in a really funny scene. She didn't have that much of a character, but she was just in a lot of the musical numbers.
Alexandra Shipp as his girlfriend was really good. She definitely stands out in certain scenes. If you're wondering if any of those two would be like nominated at the Oscars, I don't think that they have the same presence that Robin de Jesus did as a supporting player, so I wouldn't expect it, but they are very good in the movie. There's also an enjoyable smaller role by Bradley Whitford, who's playing Stephen Sondheim.
In terms of my takeaway from the film, I didn't necessarily need this to feed me what to think because I was wrapped up in it as it was. I liked just looking at this person's lifestyle and what it took for them to become famous. Like, that's enough of a movie for me, and that's what most of the movie was. However, there is an existential crisis here that they spend a lot of time on in the third act, and I definitely relate with that because it's just concerning, like, your time and what to do with it. This character is 30. I'm not even 30 yet, but I imagine like at that point, when you haven't found your footing, things can feel really scary. So I was wrapped up in that. The film reaches like a pretty obvious sort of conclusion. It worked for me, but at the same time, there were some songs, especially at the one at the end, that I didn't feel anything for. Like, the lyrics didn't deepen my understanding of anything. I felt like the fear or love thing was a little bit too broad to resonate with me.
Yeah, I think the movie lacked subtlety at times, especially in certain songs like Johnny Can't Decide. Of course, when you have a character who can't make a decision, you give them a song about it, but this one is just like literally a song about somebody who can't decide. It's like a little on the nose.
They did a little bit of foreshadowing for a key song that, is supposed to be in his musical and then also like ties into his life. That's supposed to be a little bit of a turning point for him, and it didn't feel that impactful. It was like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. Is sort of what I was expecting for that song.
Yeah, I agree. That song was Come to Your Senses. And the last song, Louder Than Words, which I understand is one of the most famous from the musical, didn't really work for me at the end. I felt like we had already absorbed the message of the film, and this felt like kind of a less impactful way to rehash that. And I also wasn't a fan of some of the lyrics, like actions speak louder than words, like meh to that. Flying or being in a cage, Sometimes the songs did feel like they were reiterating points that were illustrated very well in the non-musical things, and then the song was just like, oh, that conflict again. But there were some songs that stood out a lot. I think the opening number was enjoyable. The song Therapy in the middle of the film, that I thought was a fantastic moment because it juxtaposed tonally with the very serious scene that was happening, and then the song is like very kooky and quirky. There's some really good like facial choreography that Andrew Garfield and Vanessa Hudgens are doing in this that I really enjoyed. The song Why is like the climax of the movie, and that really worked for me too.
The editing in this film is notably very fast, as you might expect. And oftentimes they're doing the sort of editing that's accused of being superfluous. And it absolutely is. But for this movie, it makes sense because it wants to have that energy, and I didn't really mind it.
I thought the editing was really well done, especially in that one scene I'm talking about where it's kind of cutting back and forth between like Jonathan Larson performing in the band and what's happening to him.
Other times it was just to cut fast. Like I remember watching the pool scene and being like, they shot this from 20 angles and they just put them all in the timeline.
I understood
and they like cut it to the music. Yeah, no, I did too, but
because the movie does know when to show restraint sometimes, so when you get the moments that are more stylized in the editing, I think it stands out.
And lastly, I thought the camera work from Alice Brooks was great throughout. Like there were some really nice like dollying shots, and in contrast to it being very heavily edited, it felt like these shots were great enough to hold on, and they did. They kept New York feeling like New York and a little bit grimy, but also there was a lot of like sunny, really gorgeous lighting. And it did remind me of In the Heights in that way.
Which Alice Brooks also shot. Now, is this movie gonna get nominated for some Oscars? The reactions just started hitting like yesterday, And all of a sudden, some people seem to really like the movie, and Andrew Garfield especially is earning a lot of praise. I think he deserves the praise. Could he become a staple in the Best Actor race? I think that's very possible. I think he might be the most likely nomination here for this movie.
Yeah, I agree. I think this film could be strong in a few really important categories.
I want Robin de Jesus. I mentioned it, but I think he can happen. Like, you will come away from the movie thinking like, that guy was a huge standout. I think that there was a lot done in the screenplay to bring this to life. And if the movie is like a picture contender, then it could go along with that. I also think if the movie is a picture contender, then editing could go along with it because it's very showy. And I personally thought it was very well done.
Yeah, if it gets Best Picture nominated, I think screenplay and editing would go along with it. And at that point, you would definitely have Andrew Garfield there, and probably Robin de Jesus. Now, the whole question is, can it get Best Picture? Even though the reviews are not completely outstanding, like it has an 83, I think, on Rotten Tomatoes with a 7.1 average rating, and then Metacritic, it's like 74. You know, that's very good, but it's not outstanding. However, I'm not a skeptic that this can get nominated. It's one of the more audience-friendly contenders I've seen this year. It's something that, you know, if I showed my parents it, they would probably really enjoy it. My mom would definitely cry. There's just a lot for like audiences to fall in love with here.
I think artists in general like can definitely relate to it. And when we're talking about the Academy particularly, that's a bunch of artists and creatives.
It's really fun and it feels well made and like an awards movie. I could see people watching this on Netflix and going, yeah, like the Oscars should pick this thing up. If any movie is going to be carried by, you know, the general public, like this could be one of them. But that's why we have to wait and see if it performs really well on Netflix, if it catches a little bit of fire.
Yeah, because looking at the reviews alone, I'm not seeing it. Letterboxd at the moment, very, very early, okay? It's very early, but it is reflecting more along the lines with what I saw from the movie, which was something that is very pleasing, like a tearjerker. And I think it would deserve to be in the Best Picture lineup. And if Andrew Garfield's in the conversation, if Robin de Jesus stays in, maybe it can happen. We're gonna have to see if it gets like only Garfield or if it gets like all 5 of those nominations.
Yeah.
I also don't really buy sound, even though it's a musical. I don't think it did like that much with the sound that it would get nominated.
So yeah, at best it could have a nice package. I do think Garfield could go in without the film. And overall, I would give this film a strong 8 out of 10.
I probably had enough criticisms about it that I could give it an 8, but the movie was emotionally captivating enough and it had a message that I thought really resonated. And that's like what I go to the movies to see. It's what I go to see. So I would go like just into 9 territory with this one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing.
When will you go boom?